Hello and welcome to this Retail Gazette webinar entitled The Digital Transformation Mindset, How Successful Retailers Think About Strategy and Technology. My name is Ben Silito, a retail journalist of the last, 12, 13 years or so now, and for much of that time covering the technology in retail and the industry's digital evolution or revolution, however you want to see it. Really pleased to be joined by representatives of Ensono today for this webinar, who will be joining me in a very comprehensive discussion on digital transformation and everything related to that topic in retail. Let's bring them in at this stage to say hello and find out who they are. You know who I am. Simon, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself and let us know who you are and who Ensono are?
Indeed, thanks, Ben. So my name's Simon Ratcliffe. Sadly, for my age, I've been in my industry for about 30 years now, and I spend a lot of my time looking at infrastructure, old and new, in technology terms, what we can get out of it, how we can join it together, how we can make it work for our businesses. Ensono are a global organization. We're predominantly a managed service provider, and we deliver managed services on everything from the mainframe at the one end of it, which is a large market to us, all the way through to hyperscale cloud on the other, and pretty much everything in between. And we work with a lot of organizations to go on that journey or to connect the old with the new as we go through.
Okay, interesting stuff. Look forward to chatting to you shortly, Simon. And Martin, quick top line from you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So Martin Pateman-Lewis, I'm a client engagement director here at Ensono. So it's my job really to have business conversations with our customers, just to try and understand really what they're trying to achieve, where they're trying to go, what the issues and blockers are to achieving their strategy, mainly focused around obviously how technology can assist with changing the way that their businesses perform. And then I bring that back into the wider Ensono teams, who start to look at how we deploy technology to achieve those business goals. So I get to do the fun stuff in many respects and have those fun conversations.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining me today in the discussion. I think we're going to cover a lot of ground, lots of interesting stuff, lots of great examples of best practice retailers and techniques and skill sets that we need to talk about on this subject. So before we get into the deeper conversation, let me just give a quick outline of what to expect. I mean, as a brief intro, it's a really challenging time for retail right now. I seem to have been saying that for the last 12 or 13 years, ever since I started writing about it. It was like just as Woolworths went bust was when I started writing about retail, and it seems like there's been transformation and challenge ever since. But basically, retail was hugely impacted by the pandemic, bringing it a bit more up to date. A combination of seismic events over the last decade or so has ensured that ongoing disruption is something that's always on the table, and it's dictated a new way of doing business. Things are a lot different to the relative stability of the pre-digital age, and retailers are still trying to work out how they go about dealing with all that. The growth of nimble e-commerce players with fresh ideas, new routes to market has meant big change for retailers in the traditional sense, if they're to keep up and ensure that they can still keep taking a suitable share of the market. It means everyone in the industry is in digital transformation mode as they look to make the most of new tech systems, software partners, all available to help them make progress. The traditional players and even some of the newer players who arrived on the scene at the start of the 21st century have had to adopt a new mindset driven by digital. They have new tech stacks to build, older ones to modernize. It's no straightforward task, and that's the gist of what we're going to cover today. Just in general, you'll learn what does digitally enabled retail mean, how some of today's retail pain points can be solved with the right digital transformation mindset. You'll learn about some successful retailers who are doing this particularly well, and some ideas about how you can accelerate your retail digital transformation. Conversation should be around 50 minutes long, definitely no longer than an hour. If you've got questions, please use your webinar chat box in the system to the right of your screens. And we'll make sure those questions get through to the panelists and they'll answer them in due course, probably after the session, but if we've got time, we'll do them at the end. Okay, so first section, why the future of retail must be digitally enabled. First of all, as we've used it in the event title, it's worth defining what I mean by digital transformation, because it has various meanings depending on what role you have. You're kind of, various meanings within the industry. It's become a catch-all phrase for digital tech investment and focus over the last few years, particularly from traditional retailers playing catch up with some of the e-commerce pure plays or the nimble direct-to-consumer brands that have gained huge traction over the last few years, as I referenced. The truth, though, for me and many of the retailers I talk to, is we need to stop talking about digital transformation in grandiose terms. For me, it's a term that means modernizing and using modern tech to help drive business outcome, whether that's for a colleague, a customer, or for your own technology productivity. I talk to the leading CIOs out there, often interviewing them for features or hosting them for roundtables. And they're describing it as a process of continuous change and innovation, putting technology at the heart of business culture. They're not just seeing it as ad hoc tech projects. It's a mindset as opposed to a digital project per se. A lot of talk in the early days of the digital revolution was about e-commerce replacing in-person shopping. Obviously, that's happened to an extent. There are fewer shops than there were 10, 20 years ago. And the likes of ASOS, Amazon, Boohoo, Apple, all these companies and a whole array of marketplaces have kind of changed the way retail is done and taken a significant market share. But I feel like we're finding a nice point in the middle now, where retailers and consumers are realizing the ideal model is a real sort of blend between digital and physical, and it's just a case of making the other more powerful. Certainly from a multi-channel brand perspective, if you've got good digital, then your stores are going to work well. If you've got good stores, then your digital is going to be a success. So in short, that favors retailers being digitally enabled rather than digital per se. These are just my thoughts, and we'll go into it in a bit of detail later. But yeah, everyone's on a journey of systems upgrades, introducing new tech and skill sets. The head of engineering has a more elevated role. The CIO has a bigger say at the top table now. Just some examples before I bring Martin and Simon in to show the way that the industry is going. Whole Foods announced last week that Jason Bushell, who joined as CIO 9 years ago, has become the new CEO. That's a path not well trodden, that's CIO to CEO, but we're seeing that a lot more in retail. And a few other really good examples of retailers embracing the digital transformation mindset over the last few years include B&Q parent company Kingfisher. Their chief digital officer has overseen a huge change towards more product-led program management, with teams of experts, be them mobile or delivery focused, all working in their own teams with common goals of improving customer experience. Rather than one central person in charge of IT saying, this is what we're doing, you've got teams of clever thinking people, problem solvers, that are in different groups trying to find solutions to customer facing problems. And it's a real change that lots of the leaders in the industry are embarking on. Such a change in thinking has seen B&Q add their stores to the e-commerce distribution network over the last couple of years, and it's really successful for them. We'll come up with some more examples as we go along. I would say similar work is going on at Boots as well, where Richie Corbridge, as CIO, is professionalising IT, making it a more appealing and rewarding career path for people to step into, placing tech at the heart of many of the business decisions that company makes. It's a recognition that tech departments of old, keeping the lights on, keeping things secure, problem solving, are now morphing much more into strategic roles within the retail organisation. In the case of Kingfisher and Boots, it's working. These businesses are reporting decent results at the moment in a very challenging environment. They're underlining the credentials as strong CX-focused businesses supported by new tech thinking. And yeah, I mean, that sort of gives a bit of a brief overview and some examples of retailers embracing this digital transformation mindset. If I'm going to bring the panelists in now and let them show their expertise, stop me waffling for a bit. Martin, what should retailers' approach to digital transformation be to ensure their business is moving in the right direction? What are the key digital transformation mindset changes required to support successful modern retail, do you think? Quite a broad question there, but hoping you've got a few key things to think about.
Yeah, I think, thanks for that, Ben. I think fundamentally, what we're kind of seeing and what we need to see is a shift away from big projects, big transformational changes. Digital transformation for me always reminds me a little bit of David Brailsford, who kind of, transformed the British cycling team with the application of marginal gains to deliver real transformation. And I think historically, everyone's been on 3 and 5 year technology refresh cycles, and by the time they get to the end of them, they don't quite achieve what they set out to do, and the goals have changed along the way, and they don't deliver the expected outcomes. I think, where the best retailers are at right now is short-term focused projects that deliver real business outcome. And it kind of, you have an elongated broad strategy. So, if you take ASOS as a prime example, about 7 years ago, they kind of set out their strategy to, for what they call 4 in 4, which was to go from where they were, which is around about 400 million in online sales, to 4 billion in online sales in 4 years. Now, they quickly realized that their existing infrastructure in terms of their e-commerce platform, because it was a large, bulky, application of the old style, was not going to get them to where they were, but where they wanted to be. But actually, what they didn't do was they didn't go out to market and go, right, fine, we'll invest 10 billion or whatever it might be and create another monolith. They started to look at how they could chip away at the edges, what they could do to peel away the layers of the onion to deliver immediate business outcome, to deliver immediate business effect. And they measured that very, very carefully in terms of what they were looking at. So, again, fundamentally, where ASOS kind of started was the customer journey, right? Everything was kind of customer focused. How do we make sure that the digital journey for customers entering the ASOS environment was fast, smooth, efficient? How did it gather data so that they could react to customer trends and changes? So they looked at identity and access management as their fundamental building block. And then they started looking at how that could be augmented by peeling away the layers of their e-commerce platform. We've all kind of, well, my wife shops on ASOS quite a lot. And fundamentally, little things like, the fact that she can save her basket, but then 2 hours later or a day later, if she hasn't, actuated that basket and made the sale, she gets an email to remind her that, probably she did look at this stuff and would she like to buy. Now, ASOS, didn't create that as a big fundamental project. That was a small set of microservices that they created, which eventually, drove another 15% worth of actual sales through the course of the year. Well, that equates to 40 or 50 million in terms of additional revenue. So again, what we're starting to see is these retailers or retailers, not fundamentally dropping the technology that's sustained their business for the last decade, but looking at ways that they can augment technology that they've already invested in. Simon spoke briefly around our, commitment and what we do in supporting mainframe. Mainframe is still prevalent out there in a large number of organizations. You take Next as a prime example. They recently invested in supporting their mainframe and upgrading it. But what they are looking at doing is how they can use modern technology, modern cloud native services to wrap around the outside of that. So what we're starting to see, is that fundamental shift in retailers to a more nimble, agile methodology where they're putting customers at the heart of everything that they do, and creating the agility to deliver against market changes and against customer expectation by using cloud technologies, try, forget, try, scale, and moving on that way. And that's then again fundamentally changing the way they organize themselves internally. You kind of brought that up earlier, right? Which is, how are we utilizing teams of people from across different parts of the business to garner expertise in? How does that get augmented from expertise outside of the business to create that speed of change? And fundamentally things like development operations, data and analytics. And I'm not talking about the creation of massive Hadoop platforms here. I'm talking about swift utilization of data, bringing various data points together in cloud native technologies to achieve a focused business outcome, which delivers fundamentally against what the customer wants. And it's putting the customer at the heart of everything that businesses are doing. And that's where most successful retailers are at today.
It's really interesting stuff, Martin. You sort of touched upon it there, mentioning some examples of ASOS and Next. Perhaps that this is kind of relevant to this last question. Perhaps you could answer it for me. What can retail, like you said lots of the things that ASOS did well. What can traditional retailers learn from the likes of ASOS and Amazon, Apple, in terms of embracing digital? What can they look to emulate? Do you think? And I mean, many are anyway. But and then on the flip side, you mentioned Next, a traditional retailer, been around for a long time now, but they seem to have reinvented themselves recently. What benefit do some of these traditional retailers have in this new digital transformation mindset? It's not just all about these new pure play players. It's, you know, some of the older traditional businesses have a real advantage too. Just interested in your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, Simon said this a couple of days back, right? If you look at Amazon, which is the biggest success in retail in the last decade, yeah, in terms of their growth and what they offer and what they do, fundamentally, Amazon is a data business that just happened to sell books. Yeah, and what they've done incredibly well is utilize data in everything that they do to drive incremental change on a vast scale at speed to deliver what they need to do to, you know, for customers. But if you're kind of looking at, you know, some of the more traditional retailers, you know, fundamentally what they have is an omni-channel advantage over some of the pure play guys, right? Because they have infrastructure, they have stores, they have distribution facilities that have been built up over decades. And what, you know, the likes of Next and funnily enough, you know, good old Marks and Spencer's, who would have thought 10 years ago when everyone was talking about M&S as being irrelevant in the high street, you know, not having the right presence. You know, M&S has completely fundamentally changed itself in many respects through the continued application in small measure of new technology. You know, so you think about how they've used their store infrastructure now. You order online, you collect in M&S stores. That drives up you know, cross-sell, upsell opportunity, because what you order online, 30% of everything that people order online and collect in store is in an M&S food store. Right. Well, if you're in there collecting a pair of jeans that you've ordered or some underwear, let's face it, everyone buys their underwear from M&S if they got any sense. You know, but you might end up picking up some, you know, some ice cream or some sandwiches or something along those lines, doing part of your weekly food shop in that store. So what M&S have done fundamentally well, and they reacted amazingly well in the pandemic, was just introducing these new targeted technological changes which enable them to react to the market. So, you know, when everything closed down during the pandemic, M&S very cleverly took what they do best, right? They are very well known for quality. They're very well known for the knowledge and experience that their staff had. So they just took that digitally, very, very simply. You know, they started doing things like live shopping, yeah, where people from the stores, that skill set from the store was reutilized to deliver that experience to customers in live shopping events. And what they found was that they had, you know, nearly a 75% retention rate. So people were staying on for nearly 75% of the time. Then you start looking at how you take that through. So if I'm watching a live video feed, which is talking to me about homeware or some of the latest, you know, offerings of Marks and Spencer have in terms of, you know, the clothing and things like that, how do you then do simple linkages into, can I share that invite with my friends to create a community of us that are going to be looking at homeware this week? You know, how do I order live in? Oh, I like that. That's a really nice kettle, or that's a really nice set of plates and knives and forks. Can I order that live through the system? Now, you know, M&S haven't gone out and bought a massive system that creates all of that over a 3 to 5 year project and delivery term. What they've done is they've used modern techniques, modern cloud-based application and techniques to do marginal incrementations to what that experience is that gets delivered. You know, you look at, like, they suddenly moved to doing online bra appointments and measurements and things like that. Again, taking what they do well today and delivering it tomorrow. Next has stated over, you know, in the last couple of years in their annual statements about what they call total platform. Again, taking their massive distribution infrastructure and store network that they have in the UK, taking what they've done incredibly well in starting to break down their e-commerce platform. And actually now they're saying to other brands, you know, the likes of Victoria's Secret, the likes of Risa, hey, don't worry about that stuff. Yeah. Keep your brand identity, but what we'll do is we'll just use our capability to deliver that into the market. So they're starting to see themselves more of an aggregator, yeah, using what they've done very well for 20 years and delivering that and supporting new entrants. You know, Amazon's been doing it for the better part of a decade, right? You can find almost anything from anybody on Amazon in very simple and sentimental terms. and then you start to look at how other brands, the likes of Blacks has always been, a fascinating one for me because I used to do a lot of hiking when I was younger. But they've started to build social communities around their brand. Yeah. Not making themselves somebody that sells stuff, but they insert themselves into the community of outdoor pursuits. They've got, the connectivity into Instagram where people who are out hiking in a pair of Blacks boots or using a Blacks tent can post pictures of themselves in real time, as to what they've done, how they've used the Blacks, the Blacks offerings. They've got links into Duke of Edinburgh Awards, specialists who can advise on, the right footwear, the right climbing gear, the right clothing to be wearing at certain times of the year. So suddenly Blacks aren't being seen as a retailer, they're just part of a hiking community, and they're a facilitator for people to get the best out of what they want to do on a weekend. Absolutely fascinating the way technology is being used.
So much interest in change there. Really good examples as well there, Martin. We could list them off. I cover them on a weekly basis, but some really good things to think about. Let's move it back towards more sort of infrastructure stuff and some tech thinking. Dr. Martin, CEO, Lorenzo Moretti, I spoke to in the not too distant past, and he was talking to me about retailers trying to fix things with technology. They mustn't lose sight of what their customer needs. It's all very well conducting major heart and lung transplant, but in many cases retailers go through this process only to find the patient is dead at the end of it all. The customer has moved out elsewhere, basically. I mean, bringing in Simon here, what's your advice to retailers looking to move from legacy systems to a more modern IT infrastructure, and avoiding that case scenario that I just described from Lorenzo there?
But actually, do you know what? He's a really, really good example of I think the biggest problem here. So legacy, certainly in technology terms, always has this very negative connotation. I've still got my legacy Doc Martens from when I was a student, and I've added some more legacy ones as we go. I don't see them as legacy. I still see them as the most comfortable, reliable shoes that I've got. It's a positive thing, and I think that's part of the problem is actually inside these legacy systems, what the retailers have is a vast array of data. They have history, and although shopping habits have changed and what we buy has changed and where we get things from has changed, human nature fundamentally doesn't change that much, and actually a lot of that data is still of value to them. But also to a number of Martin's points in one go, yes, people are buying different things and they're buying them in different ways. And all of those examples were very, very different. Blacks is different to Next, is different to ASOS, is different to Doc Martens. And I think it's important that the retailers understand that those are just different mechanisms, a way of reaching out for different people. It's a bit like reaching out to Gen Z as opposed to baby boomers, as opposed to what all the other gens are these days. I heard the other day about the avocado generation. Maybe they want to buy things differently to everybody else. It's people want to buy in different ways, but fundamentally what still happens in the heart of the retailer is something needs to be picked from a warehouse and sent if it's being done online, or all of the other elements around it if it needs to go into the store are still fundamentally the same. They haven't changed. They need to be bulletproof and efficient. And one of the examples I always look at is, interestingly, a client of ours. Not necessarily allowed to name who they are, but I will say every little helps. And during the initial parts of the pandemic, they operate a mainframe. And they just continue to operate that mainframe. And when everything peaked and spiked, when everybody started panic buying, they just carried on. But actually, some of the new entrants into that supermarket marketplace, with their wonderful cloud native, it's all new, it fell on its knees, because at the same time as they were trying to do that, we were all trying to use Teams and all of the other online tools at the same time. It's about finding that balance. It's about constantly finding the right tool for the right job in the right place. If we see legacy and the mainframe is always cited as that mainframe bad, cloud good, we need to get rid of it. If you try and do that, that becomes one of those big monolithic projects that Martin was talking about earlier, which ultimately they don't work. They tend not to deliver. We need to be able to work out the right thing in the right place and build small pieces around that so that we can deliver access to it. At the core of it, if you don't necessarily need to change it, don't. Look, you can add on. The world is so much easier these days with microservices, with APIs, with all of the other components that are out there. joining things up is no longer that massive challenge that it was back in the day. You know, people would say to me previously, oh, you know, we need to connect to these 2 or 3 different systems, and yeah, I'd blanch white and see a big problem. These days, that's far less of a problem. I think the challenge is more about the other elements of the technology that drives this, which is the people and the processes, and trying to get those lined up. Because do you know what? We've got good technology that does what it needs to do. We just need to build those other elements in there. We need to make the mainframe more agile. We can do that. That's not a problem. Next is a really, really good example. They are seen as that ultra modern, leading edge online retailer. They've clearly and openly stated the mainframe's at the heart of it. It's going to stay at the heart of it, and it's not going to change. They've got a very modern mainframe, but they've also got all these other elements around it. And I think that's the key. The advice is identify what is potentially legacy. Some legacy does need to be replaced. Some stuff is just unsupported, it's dangerous, it's insecure, it's got all of the negativity that you do have to deal with. But actually, sometimes just modernizing that rather than going away from it is better. But also, legacy is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, I suspect I will still have those original Doc Martens in 10 years' time. They are. I mean, I dare say the soles are a little bit thin at the moment. Actually, in fact, if you do have his contact details, can you ask if they can just resold them? That would be a fantastic online opportunity. Can I just send them in, get them resold, and I get another 30 years out of them?
I'll pass it on to him. A neat way of bookmarking that, bookending that answer actually there, Simon, with bringing it back to the Doc Martens. But you mentioned people, and that's my next question. Yeah, what should the modern IT team look like in retail? Sort of makeup, philosophy. What should they be trying to achieve? I say that having spoken to one of the engineers at End Clothing. They explained to me recently that the first question the best software engineers, which is what all the top retailers are after at the moment, the first question they'll ask when assessing whether they want to work for a retailer is, how do you work? They want to learn, they want flexibility, and they want autonomy, working towards sort of common interesting goals. Interested in your thoughts there. What should the modern IT team look like, and what do you think of what Sarah from End Clothing told me?
I think that is an interesting insight into what I was saying before about the buying habits of different generations. I think the working habits of different generations are there, and actually the software engineers coming in now are of that new, I'm not sure I like the phrase gig economy mentality, but is very much what's in it for me as much as what's in it for anybody else. I think the challenge is a bit like the word legacy, and I do sound like I'm on a semantic rampage here, but the concept of the IT team, I think, is the problem. I'm a great believer that I don't think the IT team, certainly in the sense that we've recognized it for years, will exist much longer. And in fact, in many places doesn't. Too many people across the organizations already know about technology. They understand its capability. They understand what technology can do for them, which is what you need to set a strategy. You don't need to know how to be able to do it. You just need to understand what that capability is. And going back probably only 20 years, to actually understand what the technology did, you would have to go to the IT department or the CIO or the CTO. That's not necessary anymore. I think some of the more traditional, I'm going to call it dull stuff, the plumbing. Everybody needs good plumbers, but not everybody necessarily needs to keep the good plumbers inside the business. That can be given to people who can plumb really efficiently. Because again, I think there's so many modern developments around that there's no point in reinventing that wheel. All technology breaks into what I would regard as commodity technology. It's the stuff you need to have. Everybody has that. My view on that is almost spend as little as you can on it, or give it to somebody else who knows how to do it, because one person's commodity is actually somebody else's specialism. It's a bit like if you want your email run, you can go to Gmail or you can go to O365. Do you know what? Google and Microsoft are far better at running email. That's their specialism. We don't worry about it. Take the same approach, and then invest in those, those layers of the onion that Martin was referring to, and make sure that those layers are the bits that add value to your business. Those incremental changes, and I think there's some brilliant examples in that. A small change can yield, like the abandoned basket example from ASOS. That very small change yields 40 or 50 million. It's got a proper value against it. That is where the teams should be investing their time and effort, identifying those, trying to build those out. They won't all yield that much. It'd be great if they did. The world would be an easier place. But find those, and then sometimes there is a need to invest in areas that may not yield as much. But if again, if we've generated the revenue on the one side, we can start to generate efficiencies on the other. I think all of these people will sit inside the business, though. I don't think they'll necessarily sit in a centralized IT team. And if that central team does function, I think it'll become a governance function rather than it will an operational function. And I think the operations will just be spread out wherever they are. That's the fundamental change. And I think the CIO, in the ideal world, the CIO will become that a bigger presence on the board, because it's that more general business advice, but they won't necessarily run the IT function. They won't have that reporting line. And I think that's a huge, huge benefit. I think a CIO who's free from the operational challenge is going to give a lot more value back to the business, because they've got time to be creative. They've got time to be inventive. They've got time to turn up to webinars like this and actually understand what's going on. Whereas if they didn't, if they were operating, they wouldn't be. They'd all be having a P1 right now. Yeah. So I think that's a really important change.
Yeah, really, really interesting stuff, Simon. I think, sort of moving things on to the next section. It will continue what we're saying, but it's sort of a neat exchange. We've spoken generally there. We've given some great examples of how retailers adopting a digital transformation mindset are helping, boost customer experience, boost efficiency, move things forward quickly. It's quite general in how we've been describing it. And I want to bring it right to the now. It will be nothing new to retailers tuned into this event when I say there are a lot of pain points for the industry right now. I forget for a moment we're approaching peak period for many of them, which is an annual pain point. A combination of, you could list them all, couldn't you? Brexit, pandemic, lack of IT modernization, all the fallout from that is causing problems to supply chains. Things have eased somewhat since the sort of end of last year, start of this year, but it's still very challenging. Delivery promises are having to be changed and managed for customers due to where goods are. Cost of shipping goods around the world is getting more expensive, more complex in many cases. Lots of retailers have got the right stock, but in the wrong place. I've heard that described as the bullwhip effect, where inventory they bought in to meet spikes in demand, for example, in the pandemic, is no longer needed where it was brought into. So it's everything's sort of in the wrong place at the moment, as supply and demand dynamics have shifted. I'm simplifying this, of course. You could probably run a whole webinar on that particular subject, but I'm trying to paint a picture. The cost of living crisis is real as well. That's impacting consumer spending, which in turn impacts retailers, but it's also impacting internal costs for retailers too. And we've got ever increasing scrutiny on environmental practice, the green issues that retailers are facing. They're sort of operating in a shadow of potentially more regulation coming and consumer pressure about environmental matters overhanging them. And finances are tight. There's not a huge amount of money to do all the things that retailers need to do. And the consumer spending outlook for the next 12 months doesn't look great either. So, it looks to me that there's huge challenges going on. Can adopting that digitally minded digital transformation mindset help with some of these new challenges that retailers are facing? I guess Martin can bring you in here. How can adopting a digital transformation mindset solve some of the key supply chain problems retailers are focused on at the moment? Perhaps there'd benefit from some of your thinking here.
Yeah, it is such a vast topic. I mean, fundamentally, nobody in supply chain can legislate for a ship parking itself horizontally in the Suez Canal, or a pandemic which shuts down the biggest manufacturing factory on the planet in China when they went into lockdown. I mean, that kind of stuff is kind of difficult, and it provides some big bumps. But I think fundamentally and historically, there's been an underinvestment in supply chain. There's been an underinvestment in logistics. There's been an underinvestment in warehousing, and everybody kind of lived with the just-in-time, make it somebody else's problem kind of attitude in terms of how we dealt with stock management and so forth. And that kind of worked when global supply chains did what they were supposed to do, and they were predictable and everybody knew what was going on. I think in these volatile times, what we're starting to see is how data and analytics, and I'm not referring to massive data platforms, but data and analytics can fundamentally change the way businesses form their operations, and that's where some of this investment needs to come from. I was in with a retailer the other week, very big retailer, and I was looking at 6 warehouses on their massive complex, and 3 of them were dedicated towards the online business. 2 of them were dedicated towards they're supplying their retail stores, and the one over there, that's where all the returns come from. And I kind of asked the question, so how do you understand where all of your stock is? Oh, well, we don't. Yeah, online is a completely different business, has a completely different set of data sets compared to what is delivered to stores. And I was like, well, hang on a second, but it's still the same stuff, right? It's still 20,000 pairs of jeans here and 20,000 pairs of jeans there, and all the different SKUs are the same. So how do you manage stock and inventory? How do you utilize the store network that you have? And I think where the retailers that are making most success, and Next is a great example of that, and people like AO and Asda are great examples of this, is where they're starting to use or create the ability using data and analytics to get that overarching overview of stock and control of stock and where they're delivering it right the way across their business. So understanding at any one given moment, how much do I have in stock for my retail business? How much stock do I have for my stores business? How much is coming back? Because 40% of what gets ordered online comes back, right? How do I know what's coming back? How do I know what can replenish various areas of my business? And how do I know what I'm going to have to classify as wastage and chuck in the skip? That enables you to manage your inventory a whole lot better. And again, I'm not talking about big transformative projects. These are simple connectivity and communications platforms that can link, as Simon was talking about, legacy systems together to lift up that data, lift up that information, so you get a better view as to what's happening. You start to link that in with, your order processing systems, your EPOS systems in store, and you start to understand how you can move things around more efficiently. If you think about the omnichannel approach, right, it's about, the people who are doing it well are looking at things like in-store fulfillment, right? Order in store, click and collect, how you manage returns processes in store. Can you return something to a store? 10 minutes later, can that be back out on the shelves? If you can link the systems together properly, so you understand that garment's back in, or that set of plates has come back, or that bike is back into a Halford store. So data is key moving forward, and as to understanding all of this stuff. Asda's done a fantastic job. They started to look at how they could, link their online systems with in-store fulfillment, and that's enabled them to shut down 2 warehouses, that were delivering online orders. That means then that actually your cost of last mile delivery is massively reduced. That whole hub and spoke approach, devolving stock down to closer to where your end user is going to need it. We're starting to see in the market, people are starting to, nearshore manufacturing a lot more. So gone are the days of shipping everything in from China. We're starting to look at new supply markets in, sort of Europe, North Africa, which is, again, reduces that. And that kind of links back, and I know because it's such a big topic, it kind of links back to green matters, right? That whole environmentally friendly thing. Because people are concerned. I think there was a piece there where, I think it's about 40% of people now are starting to care about where things come from. 49% of people, a key consideration for them is how much, where is this made? Is it sustainable? How much does it cost to get it to me? Even though I want it tomorrow, I don't want to know that we're burning up the planet to get it for me tomorrow. So retailers now need to start to think about how they get a better view of their stock. Because if you understand what's happening in terms of your inventory, understand what's happening in terms of your your customer base, your ordering profiles, what are your fastest moving items? How can you replenish those in the right way? How do you deliver? Then that enables you to feed that data back up to your sourcing profile, right? When do I need to order stuff? What are the challenges in the market? If I'm thinking that, I'm going to have supply chain issues from China through the Suez Canal, do I need to order a month earlier than I was expecting to? Because my data is telling me that's what I need to do. And I think that's where, issues have happened. You think about, you talked about B&Q earlier, in that particular space, again, some of those sort of DIY, there's a DIY company that we're working for, it's actually part of the B&Q group. They were thinking about how do they they replenish their stores, right, with fast-moving items. So every day the store sells out of various bits of stock. There's only so much stuff you can chuck on the back of a lorry, and that was done via spreadsheets. The individual stores would send a spreadsheet. Somebody had to analyze that spreadsheet and make a decision as to what should be supplied to the store, what was going to make the most money in terms of delivery of inventory from centralized to out to the stores themselves. Simply data can answer that question and make that a lot more efficient, but it can be linked back in to analytics and artificial intelligence, which can make some of those decisions, say, right, these are the fastest moving items, these are the ones we make the most profit on, those are the ones we're going to load on the truck, which then feeds back into supply chain. So again, for me, data is a key consideration when you're looking at how you solve the supply chain problem, and utilizing the technology you have at your disposal better to make that happen. Does that kind of answer the question? It was a bit of a tricky one to go through.
No, data is key as a message coming loud and clear. I'm imagining, as I put this next question to Simon, that he may say something similar, but take it off in a slightly different angle. The whole cost of living crisis is real. Everything a lot of the features I'm working on at the moment are retailers abandoning this strategy because they need to focus on the cost of living crisis and make sure that customers can afford what they're selling, and put out new lines to serve a customer under financial pressure. I guess the question is, why might a more digitally astute retailer better deal with this period of suppressed consumer demand or cost of living crisis? Have you got any views, Simon? I guess if you've got the answer to this, then you perhaps should have been in the Prime Minister leadership contest. But interested in your thoughts, nevertheless.
I've got some answers to it. I mean, I think it is important, and has always been important that yes, there's an opportunity to bring out maybe new and different lines at a time like this, but it's also about trying to reduce wastage. To Martin's point about people not necessarily knowing where things are. I mean, one of the really good examples that we've got is Nicer. You see Nicer corner stores everywhere. People traditionally go into those stores, so they're actually quite an unpredictable population in that sense, because people will go in and they will buy whatever. They don't tend to do their big shops there, so it's kind of ad hoc. And it's really important that Nicer can get the right stock in at the right time and it doesn't spoil. And a really good example of that is something like ice cream. Do I sell ice cream? Do I sell hot coffee? It depends on the weather. Actually, what Nicer are doing is they're constantly monitoring the weather. So they're always looking at things outside that will drive people's behavior. So data isn't just about, let's have a look inside and see what people are doing. Let's constantly analyze the baskets, the trends, the habits. It's actually, let's look at all of the other factors out there, gather that as data and pull it into our modeling process. And I think that's where the really astute ones are going. They are looking beyond just what they are doing and what their customers are doing, and they're looking at all the other factors that influence how people will behave. It's interesting, now when you go on to more and more websites, people are going, now's a good time for a short interest-free loan. It's difficult to get an interest-free loan anywhere else. I mean, oddly, I bought a large amount of building gravel from somebody the other day, and they offered me interest-free payments on that. Never seen that before, but I can understand why it's there, because that would then release up potentially more cash in that month for me to spend on something else, and because it's interest-free when interest rates are going up, it's a positive thing. They're reflecting that, they're using that data. So I think it's looking beyond just that normal behavior, I think is the short answer to that question.
Yeah, no, really interesting thoughts, Simon. I guess question for both of you, maybe one of you wants to take it and just give us a quick example before we move on to the sort of final section. In light of these wider social economic challenges, which have inevitably become priorities, how can CIOs or the IT decision makers within a retailer make a case for more investment in digital, in tech, in infrastructure, against this backdrop? It's quite difficult to it's quite often quite difficult to convince CEOs, CFOs to make that IT investment, especially when so much else is going on. Does anyone have any kind of tactics that work best to get these big projects on the table?
I'd like to put a hat on that I used to wear many years ago as a CFO and answer that question, if I may. because I actually worked in the construction industry in the back end of the early 90s when it was exactly the same pressure, and people were trying to make cases to me for investment. A really good CFO will actually look at the value of it, and actually a lot of the investments people are looking for. And again, back to Martin's point, it's about incremental gain or marginal gain. It's not about no CFO right now is going to sign off for 3 or 4 or 5 year project. It's highly unlikely to happen. But they will see and look at each one on merit for, will it reduce costs? Will it increase revenue? Will it increase my market? They will take a view. A good CFO will take that view. A good CIO will present it in those terms. There is always that. There's that long-standing joke about the CIO and the CFO do not speak the same language as each other. I think actually retail is a pretty good example of where they are coming to speak a more and more common language. They are better understanding each other, and therefore those conversations are better happening. So although, yes, the pressure is on, I actually think that the smarter organizations are continuing the investment because they are seeing the gains each time. And if it is, as in the ASOS example, they can yield that 40 or 50 million with a small incremental change. Who's to say that the next one won't find something similar as well? It's about seeing it in that right context.
Oh, interesting. I've put think, build, and run on these slides here. It's just a reference to sort of Burberry's digital transformation in the early 2000s when they sort of mobilized everything internally. And it was the tech team at the time there tell me that it was a case of putting mobile devices in the hands of executives, making them think digitally, and making them sort of consider digital at every opportunity. And it was that sort of influence that they put on the senior team that enabled them to build things and run quickly with new strategies that were digital focused. Really interesting stuff. Just one quick question before coming on to the last section. If efficiency is the name of the game, and lots of what we've been talking about is about improving efficiency, whether it's supply chain transparency or doing things more efficiently for the good of the environment. Doing more with less. I guess if you were going to summarize this quickly, either of you, what makes an efficient retailer in the modern age? Could you give us a few bullet points to suggest why? Simon, I think you might have had something prepared on this, but Martin, if you had some extras, that would be great.
A lot of it is about automation. A lot of it is about the logistical automation of being inside a warehouse, being very efficiently pick, pack, and send. And also have the general intelligence in the system to deliver in as few packages as possible. There are organizations who are exceptionally good at that. I opened a package up the other day from Amazon. It was a book I'd pre-ordered 7 months ago along with something I'd ordered the previous day. It was in the same package. It just arrived. I mean, I'll be honest, I was stunned. It is finding that level of efficiency. All of that is driven by robots inside their warehouses. I know not everybody can do that, but they are getting more and more and more automated. And it's about tuning. It's about tuning the systems to behave in an efficient way. Again, a lot of them potentially in the past have been built to make the customer experience paramount. Now it's about taking the same systems and changing the code, for want of a better phrase, inside them to make to yield the operational efficiency out of that as well, but also to look where things can be automated, simplified, where, again, going back to the Green Matters piece, where we can do it in fewer journeys and put less carbon out there. It reduces those costs as well, so it becomes significant.
Martin, anything to add to that? Sorry, I may have put you on the spot.
I really couldn't add much more to that succinct and very insightful update from Simon.
Yeah. Well, moving on to the last section, accelerating digital transformation. Talk a little bit about partnerships here. Retailers are partnering with tech companies in different ways to the past. They're also working with different types of tech company than they would have done in the past. I'm thinking Currys and Uber for quick, rapid delivery. WH Smith and Boots have got Deliveroo partnerships, kind of tech partnerships you would never have imagined probably 5-6 years ago even. It's a case of retailers realizing there's a service they know their customers want, but they can't necessarily do it, so they go into someone else to supply it. I guess, yeah, in terms of big tech, instead of just jumping into these massive ERP rip and replace things, as you mentioned before, we're seeing retailers look into the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazon Web Services of this world, getting all their customer operational data in a central place in the cloud, making it easier to create microservices and build products that quickly and efficiently, while sort of overseeing infrastructure change. Yeah, retailers are working differently with suppliers. Boots CIO Richie Corbridge, who I've mentioned already, it says retailer tech partnerships are less master servant now. It's much more a case of collaboration, less ego based. You shouldn't need to get the contract out unless there's something fundamentally wrong, he tells me, which I thought was an interesting point. But yeah, I guess loads of examples I could go into there, about, you know, how retailers are working differently with tech partners. But it's just interested to bring in Martin and Simon's thoughts here as well. I guess, yeah, with that backdrop, what are the first steps a retailer who has a legacy technology system, or, you know, legacy technology, and wants to move away from it, optimize their stack for a modern world? What are the types of opening conversation you're having with them today in terms of partners and partnerships? Perhaps that's one for you, Martin, to kick off with.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting comment you make. Yeah, well, firstly, there's an interesting point that you kind of made in terms of the supplier and customer relationship. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing more and more from our side is what we classify as rainbow teams. Yeah, in terms of taking what the customer has already, because most of them are on a digital journey, most of them have some sort of capability to deliver digital outcomes now built into the business. And it's about augmentation, it's about coaching, it's about working collaboratively to achieve those goals. And I think, you know, that the retailers that are seeing most value in terms of their supplier agreements or their supplier arrangements are the ones who are embracing that, looking at how they can bring in expertise for short or long-term projects, mainly these days shorter-term projects, where what we can do is learn from each other. So you bring that expertise in, you start to create together, and you learn from each other as you go. And I think, you know, the conversations that we kind of have with our customers now, you know, I remember when I first started talking to customers years ago, it used to be, hey, my widget does this, is that of interest? Now the conversation is so much more in terms of what's your strategy, what are you trying to achieve, which areas of your business need refining, which areas of your business do you not necessarily have a problem with, but do you need augmentation? You know, and I think about, you know, again, one customer that we're kind of working with, you know, we did a whole strategy piece with them, which enabled them to sort of see where their 3 to 5 year strategy would go. But that wasn't around technology per se, that was around the kinds of things that they wanted to achieve in the market, the areas that they thought would give them leadership in the market and drive their business forward for the next 3 to 5 years. And then what we started to do was peel back, and we've talked about the onion again, but peel that back into, right, what are the technology elements that need to be implemented at stages along that journey to achieve that fundamental goal as to where you want to get to? Now that could be growth, that could be efficiency, that could be whatever it might be. Mainly, you know, with every retailer, it's growth, right? It's grow or die in retail. It's a very simple dynamic. So, you know, when you're looking at that, you then start to have those conversations around, right, what are the earliest wins? What are the simplest technologies that we can put into play? What skills do you already have? You know, we've always operated a philosophy of, you know, reuse before rent, before buy, before build. Yeah, very, very simple philosophy. But what it means is, what have you got? How can we augment that? What's the fastest way we can do that? What have you got already, and what can we augment that with? And how can we help you? And I think those are the conversations more and more we're starting to have. And it's fundamentally so much more a collaborative conversation with customers now than it ever has been. In terms of everybody is very open in terms of what they're trying to achieve and what they can achieve with what.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting stuff. And yeah, so Simon, do you want to shine a bit of an extra Ensono light on that? Why do retailers choose to partner with Ensono? What is it you offer the industry in particular? What's your USP in a way?
I mean, clearly we offer Martin and all his experience, which has got to be a good excuse for most people to come. However, there is a little bit more.
He showcased his expertise well today, as you've done. Indeed.
I think there's some interesting words in there. Unfortunately, they're potentially slightly overused, but they're really important. There is this notion, it's about partnership, it's about collaboration, it's about understanding. And one of the things that we are quite keen on is actually crafting agreements with people. I mean, albeit these contracts are the ones that tend to get put back in the drawer because I'm in an agreement. They shouldn't be read unless they're needed. But to build them around, actually, let's share outcomes here. Let's put skin in the game. We are prepared to say, look, we believe that what we can do will shift the needle on what you're doing, and we are actually prepared to put some or all of our fee on the line for that as well. So I think that's important. It's about getting into that partnership model, about working together and having a different approach to it. Because as a managed service provider, you say that word to most people, they just sit there and they go, well, that's all about not being able to change anything, keeping it the same, being really expensive. That's not helpful. That's not helpful to us, because actually if we take that view with our clients will go bust. And that's not good for us. We want change. We want to drive that dynamic in there, but we need to be able to do it with all of us facing in the same direction. It's really, really important that we have that understanding of where the client wants to go, and then we can share, these are the things that we can do to drive that. But again, because we have this view that we will look after the mainframe on the one side, but we'll go through all the way through and we'll help and look after the hyperscale cloud on the other, and we'll do everything else in between. We can move people across that journey. We can take people. We don't want that static world. We want to be able to help people work. And I think that's why people come to us, and that's why people work with us, because they see that actually genuinely we're trying to enable it. We're trying to also do just some of the dull stuff. Come back to what I said previously about commodity technology and differential technology. We've got the ability to help on both sides, but actually some of the commodity stuff we can just make go away. Don't worry about it. We'll sort that out. And as it moves on, there's not a penalty for it moving on. We're actually trying to encourage that as well. It's that flexibility. So partnership is key. It's working together and sharing those values and goals, and writing a contract, albeit it goes back in a drawer, but writing a contract that reflects those values and goals that we're sharing between us. And I think that is absolutely the key.
I think fundamentally,
Martin, I might need to curtail things a little bit as we hit the top of the hour. Can you believe we've been speaking for an hour? Could go on for another 2, I reckon. But no, I think in Martin and Simon, in your conversation so far, you've proved that expertise and shown what any retailer working with Ensono would get. So really fascinating talking to you, and I've really enjoyed sharing some thoughts about digital transformation in retail with you. It's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you so much, Simon. Hope you've enjoyed that. Have you enjoyed that?
Yeah, it was fun. I had a great time. So thanks, Ben.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We had a lot of listeners tuning in for this one, so hopefully that's given you a few nuggets to think about in your digital transformation journeys and switching your mindset to more digital as you look for successful, prolonged retailing into the future. Loads of information on Retail Gazette if you want to find out about these kind of topics. There's a regular newsletter, regular news updates, so do tune into that. But hopefully we'll see lots of you on a webinar in the future, and hopefully you've got some value. Cheerio for now. Thank you so much.